Imagine two people, both 32 years old, both working professional jobs, both earning roughly $70,000 a year. Same salary, same city, same cost of living. But here's where it gets interesting. 5 years from now, one of them has $40,000 saved, a small investment portfolio quietly growing in the background, and zero credit card debt. The other one? Still living paycheck to paycheck. Maybe a little credit card debt they can't quite shake, maybe a savings account that looks embarrassingly thin every time they check it. Same income, completely different financial reality. Now, before you think the first person had some kind of advantage, they didn't. No inheritance, no side hustle pulling in six figures, no rich uncle who passed down a stock portfolio. The difference between these two people isn't income, and it's not luck. It's something far more invisible, far more psychological, and once you see it, you genuinely cannot unsee it. That's what we're getting into today. We have this deeply rooted belief in our culture that money problems are income problems, that if you just earned more, got the raise, landed the better job, finally cracked six figures, everything would fall into place. The stress would disappear, the savings would stack up, life would get easier. And on the surface, that belief makes complete sense. More money coming in means more money to work with, right? Except that's not what the data says. Studies on lottery winners consistently show that within a few years, most of them end up back at roughly the same financial position they were before they won. Not all of them, but enough to make the pattern impossible to ignore. And on the other end of the spectrum, there are people, school teachers, social workers, nurses, earning $40,000 or $50,000 a year who manage to retire comfortably, buy a home, and leave something behind for their kids. How? The answer points to something psychologists call the gap between earning money and keeping money, and they are not the same skill. Here's a simple way to think about it. Imagine your income is water flowing into a bucket. Most financial advice is entirely focused on how to get more water flowing in. And yes, that matters. But if the bucket has holes in the bottom, it doesn't matter how fast the water comes in. It's all going out just as fast. Most people who struggle financially aren't earning too little. They have leaky buckets. And the leaks aren't random. They follow very specific psychological patterns, patterns that are baked into the way our brains work, patterns that once you understand them, explain almost everything. So let's talk about these leaks. Let's actually name them. Leak number 1, lifestyle inflation. This is probably the biggest one, and it's so sneaky that most people never notice it happening. Here's how it works. You get a raise, maybe a 10% bump, your base anxiety about money eases a little, and then almost automatically, almost unconsciously, your spending rises to meet your new income. You upgrade the apartment, the old car starts to feel a little embarrassing, you start eating out a bit more because, hey, you earned it. Subscriptions get added, clothes get nicer, vacations get slightly more expensive. None of these are bad things on their own. The problem is that the raises keep coming, and so does the spending, and the gap between what you earn and what you keep never actually grows. Economists have a name for this, the hedonic treadmill. It's the human tendency to adapt to improvements in our circumstances, returning to a baseline level of satisfaction almost regardless of how much things improve. You get the nicer apartment, it feels amazing for about 3 weeks, then it's just your apartment, and now you need something else to feel that same level of satisfaction. The treadmill keeps moving and you keep running, but you never actually get anywhere. Leak number 2, the status spending trap. This one is deeply human and almost embarrassingly predictable. We spend money to signal things to other people. The watch, the car, the neighborhood, the brand on the label. These aren't just purchases, they're communications. They're saying, look at what I've achieved, look at where I am.
The psychologist Thornstein Veblen called this conspicuous consumption way back in 1999, and here we are more than 100 years later, and the pattern is more powerful than ever, because now we have social media showing us everyone's highlight reel at all times. Here's the brutal truth about status spending. Most of the time, the people you're trying to impress are barely paying attention. They're too busy managing their own financial anxiety and trying to signal their own status. Morgan Housel, who wrote one of the best books on money psychology, put it perfectly. He said people buy expensive things hoping to earn admiration and respect. But what people actually feel when they see someone with a flashy car isn't admiration for the person, it's a fantasy about how they themselves would feel owning that car. The car doesn't make you admired, it makes other people wish they had the car. It's a game where nobody actually wins, and everyone's paying an enormous entry fee. Leak number 3, the invisible cost of convenience. This one is quiet. It doesn't feel like a leak. It feels like normal modern life. Think about everything in your life that you pay for because it's convenient. Delivery apps, streaming subscriptions. How many do you actually have right now? Gym membership you barely use, subscriptions to apps you forgot existed until the charge appeared on your statement. Individually, each of these costs almost nothing. $8 here, $15 there, but they stack. There's a concept in psychology called subscription blindness. Once a recurring charge feels small enough, our brains basically stop tracking it as spending. It just becomes ambient noise in our financial life. A study a few years back asked people to estimate their monthly subscription spending. The average person underestimated it by more than half. You're not being careless. Your brain is just doing what brains do. It tunes out things that feel small and predictable. But small and predictable, multiplied by 12 months, multiplied by 10 or 15 subscriptions, becomes a very real number. Leak number 4, treating savings as what's left over. This is probably the most foundational mistake on the list, and it's the one that keeps most people stuck. The standard way most people think about saving money goes like this. I earn money, I pay my bills, I spend on what I need, I maybe spend a little on what I want, and then whatever's left over at the end of the month, that's what I save. The problem, there's almost never anything left over. Life has a way of expanding to fill whatever space exists. Something always comes up. The car needs something, the dentist, a friend's birthday, a flight you didn't budget for. And saving becomes this perpetually deferred intention. I'll start saving more when things settle down, when I have less going on, when things are more stable. And things never quite settle down. The fundamental shift that separates people who build wealth from people who don't is this. They don't save what's left over. They save first, and then they live on what's left over. It sounds like a small difference. It is not a small difference. It's everything. Now, let's go a level deeper, because understanding the leaks is useful, but understanding why the leaks exist, the actual psychological machinery underneath, that's where the real insight lives. Insight number 1. Your brain doesn't actually process money as an abstract number. It processes money as pain and pleasure. Specifically, spending money activates the same neural pathways associated with physical pain, and receiving money, getting a deal, finding something for cheaper than expected, those activate the brain's reward system. This is why shopping feels good. It's not just the item, it's the dopamine hit that comes with the transaction itself. And this is also why financial discipline feels hard, because at a neurological level, you are fighting your own brain's pain and reward system every time you decide not to spend. When you skip the purchase, at some level your brain registers it as a small loss, a small pain, which is why willpower alone is such an unreliable strategy for managing money. You're trying to out-stubborn a biological system that evolved over hundreds of thousands of years. The people who manage money well have typically figured out ways to work with that system rather than against it. automating savings so the decision never has to be made, structuring their environment so the temptations are further away, and reframing their relationship with the future to make it feel more real and more immediate. Insight number 2, present bias, why the future you doesn't feel real. There's a quirk in human psychology called present bias, and it might be the single biggest reason why people who understand saving still don't save enough. Present bias is our tendency to weigh immediate rewards far more heavily than future rewards, even if the future reward is objectively more valuable. Here's a simple illustration. If I offer you $50 right now or $60 in a week, most people take the $50. Even though $60 is more money, waiting a week feels like too much of a sacrifice. Now apply this to retirement saving. You can either enjoy $200 this month, dinners out, a new pair of shoes, a fun weekend, or that $200 could sit in a compound interest account for 30 years and become something like $3,000.
Rationally, $3,000 is obviously better, but the $200 is tangible right now. The $3,000 is in a future so distant it doesn't quite feel real. The version of you that will be 65 years old, do you really know that person? Do you feel connected to them? Research suggests most people feel about as emotionally connected to their future self as they do to a stranger, and it's very hard to sacrifice for a stranger. This is why the most effective financial tools are the ones that remove choice from the equation entirely. Automatic pension contributions, automatic transfers to savings accounts on payday. When the decision is taken out of your hands, present bias can't interfere. Insight 3. The identity piece, the story you tell about money. Here's something that almost nobody talks about in personal finance conversations, but it might be the most important thing of all. Most people have a deeply ingrained identity around money, a story they tell about themselves, often inherited from childhood, that quietly shapes every financial decision they make. If you grew up hearing that money is stressful, that wealthy people are greedy, that wanting financial security is somehow materialistic or unspiritual, those beliefs didn't disappear when you became an adult. They went underground, and from underground, they run the show. Some people unconsciously believe they don't deserve financial security. Some people equate spending with love. They show up for people by spending money on them and feel guilty doing anything else. Some people associate saving with deprivation, with scarcity, with childhood memories of never having enough, so they overcorrect by spending freely because it feels like abundance. None of these patterns are the person's fault. They were absorbed, inherited, picked up from the financial climate of the household they grew up in. But they are invisible, and invisible forces are the ones that do the most damage because you can't see them working. The first step in changing your financial behavior isn't reading a budgeting book. It's understanding the story you've been telling about money and asking yourself, honestly, is this story actually serving me? So what do you actually do with all of this? Let's make it practical. Step 1. Automate the Save First habit. Set up an automatic transfer to a savings or investment account the day your paycheck hits. Not a manual transfer, not a reminder, automatic. The money leaves before you can spend it, before your brain can register it as available, before present bias can do its work. Even if it's small to start, even if it's $20 a month, the habit of structure matters far more than the amount, especially in the beginning. Step 2. Run the subscription audit. Go through your last 3 months of bank and credit card statements and write down every recurring charge. Not from memory. Actually look. You will find things that surprise you. Cancel anything you haven't actively used in 60 days. Not because you should deprive yourself, but because you're currently paying for things you're not even enjoying. That's not sacrifice. That's just reclaiming money that's disappearing for no reason. Step 3. Pause before lifestyle upgrades. When your income increases, a raise, a bonus, a new job, make a rule for yourself. Before you upgrade your lifestyle with that extra money, wait 90 days. Keep living as you were. Let the income accumulate, and after 90 days, decide consciously how you want to allocate it.
You might decide to upgrade your apartment. That's fine. But deciding after 90 days of reflection is very different from upgrading automatically and immediately, which is what lifestyle inflation does. Step 4. Make the future feel more real. Counteract present bias by making your future self concrete. Some people write a letter to themselves describing what they want their life to look like in 20 years. Some people use apps that show them an aged version of their face. Whatever it takes to make that future self feel like a real person worth sacrificing for. When you can see the future you clearly, when you feel genuinely connected to that person, saving stops being deprivation and starts being a gift. Step 5. Question the money story. Ask yourself, what did my household communicate about money when I was growing up? Was it talked about openly? Was it a source of stress and conflict? Were wealthy people admired or resented? Was spending associated with love or celebration? You don't have to do a decade of therapy. Just bring the unconscious story into consciousness, because once you can see it clearly, you can decide whether you want to keep running it or whether you want to write a new one. Here's the thing about the two people we talked about at the beginning. The one who ended up with savings and investments and financial stability, they didn't do anything heroic. They didn't sacrifice everything and live like a monk. They didn't work 3 jobs or stumble into some amazing investment opportunity. They just made a few structural decisions that their brain could work with instead of against. They saved automatically so they didn't have to rely on willpower. They noticed their lifestyle creeping up and made conscious choices about when to let it and when to hold the line. They thought about the future version of themselves not as some distant abstract concept, but as a real person whose life was being shaped by decisions made today. That's it. No secret formula, no magic strategy, just the boring, invisible, deeply psychological work of aligning your everyday financial behavior with who you actually want to become. The salary was never the problem. The problem was a set of habits and beliefs operating quietly underneath the surface. Habits and beliefs that were inherited or absorbed, never examined, and therefore never changed. Now you've looked at them. What you do next is up to you.